Welcome to Apothecary After Dark, the official podcast of Amityville Apothecary.
This is what real witches talk about when the doors are locked, the lights are low, and the incense is still smoldering.
From spellwork and shadow work to hot takes on hexes, healing, and everything in between, we're serving up magic, mystery, and a little bit of mischief.
So pour a cup of your favorite libation, light that protection candle, and settle in. It's about to get witchy. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Apothecary After Dark. My name is Dina Rosenberg, co-owner and co-host of Amityville Apothecary and Apothecary After Dark, and I'm here with my best friend.
Hi, guys. I'm Danielle, and I am happy to be here with you. We have a very special guest with us tonight. He is joining us from Florida, and he's working on his 12th book, which is amazing, the fabulous Nicholas Pearson, and we're delighted to have you here. So thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So we sell so many crystals at Amityville Apothecary. That was actually our sort of entryway into the store in terms of the amount of product that we have the most of are crystals, rocks, stones of all different kinds. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey into the world of crystals, rocks, maybe working with them metaphysically?
Yeah, so it's a journey that I've been on for the majority of my life. I think my mineral collection officially started about 31 years ago by my clearest reckoning. Before that, I was the stereotype of the kid who picked up rocks everywhere I went. You know, really precious mystical memories embedded in stone, like a summertime trip to the mountains or, our kind of weekly sojourn to the seashore, but also less mystical places like grocery store parking lots. Basically, if a rock spoke to me, it came home with me. And so we had to do the ritual of like sorting the rocks in Nicholas's pockets at the end of the week when laundry was done by my mother. And that is a practice that still goes on to this day, 3 decades later, where we're still got to double check all of my pockets for rocks at the end of the week when we do laundry. And, from an early age, I would say that I was kind of a strange child. I wasn't raised in a particularly religious household. My father grew up on Long Island, actually, very, very Catholic. So Catholic that I wasn't raised anything in particular. And when other families did church on the weekends, my dad and I would go to the local library. And, some weeks it would be books on science. I'd read everything I could about rocks or fish or, whatever I could find that interested me. Started with the picture books and gradually got fewer and fewer pictures and more words. But simultaneously, I've always had this profound love of folklore and spirituality. I really loved world mythology very early on. That was something my dad could really get behind as well. And I started to notice that in the folk tales, in the kind of religio-magical practices and the myths I was learning from so many different cultures, they were just poetic retellings of the same natural phenomena that I was reading about in the science books. And I had like no trouble kind of reconciling that they were just two different symbol sets describing the same phenomena. And whether we look through the lens of spirituality or we look through the lens of science, the reason we explore these phenomena is to better understand how we fit into things. Ultimately, it's the age-old question, who are we? What are we here for? What's going on? Everything is some more sophisticated version of that. And I kind of just followed that breadcrumb trail for quite a long time. By the time I was a teenager, I discovered that the idea of healing with crystals, that the kind of spiritual properties of stones wasn't just a historic thing. It wasn't just something you read about in previous cultures and their attributions to them, but there was a living, breathing movement of crystal healing going on in the world right now. And that was pretty much it. Once I discovered that people still did this, I wanted to learn everything I could about rocks. I was, learning geology and crystallography as best as I could as a teenager with the limited resources and the very early days of the internet. But I was also reading every book on the magic and myth and folklore and energy of stones. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I'd been invited by my local metaphysical shop to start teaching workshops on
Oh,
the subject
wow.
matter. Yeah.
Wow.
That's 21 years ago now, a little over 21 years. And when I went away to school the following semester to study music, it was originally a music ed major at a really prestigious small private school, university here in Central Florida that I picked solely for its music program. In my kind of like financial aid package, one of the things was the federal work study programs. I was assigned a job somewhere in campus, and it was this place called the Gillespie Museum. I assumed because it was my second choice school, I registered very, very late. They put me in the building next door to all of my colleagues in the School of Music. They all had jobs in like the music lab and the music library or the performance venue. But the building next door was the art school, and all the visual arts were there, as well as the language arts. Small school, those are how things go sometimes. And finally it occurred to me that if I will just show up to this job, even though I have no interest in it, they will pay me. My Capricorn sensibilities took over, and so
Yeah.
I asked an upperclassman where I could find this Gillespie museum before I just start wandering, and he said, the Gillespie, why on earth do you want to go to the rock museum?
Oh, that's
And I just looked at him.
interesting.
I'm like, I'm gonna need more information. We have a what now? And so we could say the rest is history. I marched myself down right after rehearsal. They were closed. So I went home and I wrote my boss an email. And that was a day when people didn't live in front of their computers. So I followed up with a voicemail. And then just to be sure, I made sure that I was waiting when the doors got unlocked to come in and show up and see if I could still work there, even though it had been a couple weeks since I got the assignment. And she's like, we'd be happy to have you. I got your email and your voicemail. Welcome. And within a couple weeks, I got as close to unrestricted access to the collection that I think probably any student has ever been given. I dove in headfirst into the science. I was learning so much about the history and everything else that I could related to every specimen I could lay eyes on or hands on or learn about. I was doing curatorial work with new exhibits. I was working on program for school groups. We did a lot of educational outreach. And then it occurred to me that my music ed degree was going to be really unfulfilling my whole life if all I could do was teach high school band. Not a thing that I ever pictured myself doing, but it seemed like the natural thing to get a degree in. I love teaching and I love music, but that was not the right combo. And the curator of the museum, who was the department head for the geography and earth science department, convinced me to just switch majors. And so I did. We were going to like customize a degree track for me. And then I ran out of money. I packed most of my stuff into storage at one point and nearly immigrated to Japan. That didn't work out. So I ended
Oh,
up working
wow.
in America. But, all along, rocks have been this like constant in my life, whether it's through my personal practice or teaching regularly ever since then. It's the thing I've done most consistently with my adult life. And I'm really happy to say that after, I think, uh, almost 20 years away from the museum, they actually hired me back on for a really specialized role in collections management. So I get to do earth science during the school year and, wear that hat and work with this historic collection. And just be Mr. Geology. But then outside of that, I get to take all the cool things that I'm learning and apply them to my spiritual practice as well.
That is that's like an amazing tale.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm always amazed, mystified, shocked when the universe conspires to make sure you're where you need to be. Like I don't like we see it happen all the time and I don't know why
There's no
it's
coincidence that you were meant to do this,
yes.
and that theme recurs. So, listening to your story, it's wild how the doors just kept opening up for you, even when you had no idea that it was happening. It's very cool.
Really
Yeah,
is.
it's humbling, and I'm just thankful that I get to do this with my life.
So your title, The Witching Stones, it's a really interesting combination of, crystal lore, legend, how the stones have worked with humanity over time, and then a lot of practical how to use the stones in spell work, which you don't really often see crystals and stones take the starring role in spell work. So what inspired you to sort of say, like, you know what? There's more to spell work than how it's been portrayed. And we can really begin to weave this tale with the stones that human beings have been working with for so long.
The inspiration from this book is like lots of different separate strands that got woven together. Part of the reason I wrote the book is kind of born out of my firsthand experience of just falling in love with things that look like ordinary rocks: flint and slate and chalk and chert and granite. And they have such wonderful geological stories to tell, but they have incredible energy and incredible magic to offer if only we learn how to listen. Some of it is born out of this just incredible experience that I put together with my best friend in this field and outside of this field, just in life in general. We did a really wonderful treat in kind of southwestern uh, England and traipsed along the sacred countryside and got really up close and personal with the folklore of some of these stones. Some of them very common and humble, and some very unusual and decidedly more precious. And then the other part of it is I enjoy telling the story of stone. I enjoy telling it from so many different facets. And, I have always kind of positioned myself more from, we'll say, the kind of broader metaphysical space forward. And I hate to admit this out loud, but I've never really felt witchy enough for the witchy crowd, even though if people observed my private practice, they'd be convinced. And a large part of that is because people know me as the crystal guy, and crystals just kind of get pegged as this super new agey thing. And crystals, as most people might work with them today, is in fact a super new agey thing, but it is but one small link in a chain that goes back to the beginning of human history, human prehistory. And I mean, we have examples of the kind of human mineral relationship that are super intentional, that are clearly ritualized, that are magical in nature, and that focus on pretty common healing stones like we would find in any metaphysical shop that go back at least a quarter of a million years. So this is before Homo sapiens. Hominids have been developing these kind of ritual relationships with stones. So I wanted to write a book that reminded us that there is magic in the earth anywhere we go, that the folklore can inform our practice today, and that whatever we're doing is informed by this truly ancient trend. And maybe, just maybe, we should pay attention to it instead of just brushing it off as a new age practice.
Yeah. I relate so much to that. And similar to what you said, how you never felt like you were quite witchy per se, I didn't really connect with that word witch, especially even when we were opening up the shop. I'm much more connected with nature. I used to climb trees and play with rocks, and when I was a kid, and it's how I restore. And I'm an energy healer as well, similar to you. So I've just always felt that my powers were connecting with the nature around us and utilizing those as tools and such, and that they have their own essence and energy about them. And how do you work with them, and how do people work with them, and what do they represent over time, and time unlimited, infinity. So this book is really fascinating, and I've really been enjoying reading it. Thanks for sending us an advance copy. I'm excited for everybody to read it because there's so much depth to these items that you feature in the book that may seem commonplace but have been used for millennia. And it's just really, it's very well done. So we actually have a lot of the stones on display right here in front of us.
We tried to get as many as we could. It was fun. We were running around the shop.
I love the hagstone.
I know. The hagstone is actually from my personal collection, and somebody had found one in Ireland on their trip and brought it back for me. And what's cool is there's two holes. So one goes through this way and then one goes through this way. So interesting. And I felt bad about her because Danielle had asked, "Do you have a hagstone?" And I'm like, "I do. Where?" And then she was like so angry with me. She's like, "You've put me on this shelf and I've been in this cabinet for 3 years."
Well,
So
now she's
here
getting
she
front and
is.
center. And then also how you call the sea urchin fossil little fairy loaves. I love those.
It's so fun.
And I love the lore behind it. Can you just share a little snippet or teaser about why this fossilized sea urchin is called a fairy loaf?
Yeah, so I have like really fond memories of my great grandmother's home right on the Gulf Coast of Florida. And, maybe once a year we'd make the trek to see her because it was quite far from where I grew up in Southeast Florida. And I didn't like the beaches in her neck of the woods whatsoever because they weren't the lush, warm waters I was accustomed to. And my favorite barrier reef protected beach, which has this warm, inviting water. And here was this cold, rocky environment. And the water was never the same color, but amidst all the rocks, there were these tiny little fossil sea urchins with this little 5-pointed star emblazoned on one side, kind of dome shaped like a rustic loaf of bread or a miniature biscuit. And I still have a stash from my great grandmother's property, which has long since passed into somebody else's hands. And they're so magical. So the name fairy loaf is one of many that is given to them. They are known as bishop's knees and shepherd's crowns and shepherd's hearts and sheep hearts and star stones and fairy bread, and the list just keeps going on. But they are associated with this kind of otherworldly realm of possibility, of magic. They have long been connected to the magic of hearth and home. There's some folklore that says that any home in which a fairy loaf dwells will never run out of bread. So, it's that kind of sympathetic magic. We've got the bread-shaped rock and it never goes off and it never runs out. So therefore we will always be nourished in this space. It's almost like spiritual nourishment for the soul. And then we add to that 5-pointed star. There's so much rich history associated with that makes it such a magical talisman. And they're so darn fun to collect because every species looks different. Some are heart-shaped, some are perfectly round, some are actually almost perfectly spherical with ridges or dots, and some have really pronounced stars and some not so much. So I enjoy them quite a lot.
Absolutely. I like how you wrote in the book, it ties the humanity and the divinity within, and it represents both. It was really beautifully stated and explained. Yeah. It was very cool.
Thank you.
So if you could give a witch that maybe doesn't really work with stones an invitation or a recommendation of how to begin working with the witching stones in their practice, because I know a lot of people that start to get into crystals get overwhelmed because they all of a sudden they just like want to start collecting all of them, and then the next thing they know, they don't have food because they have all the crystals. Right? So what would you suggest or recommend to the new witch that maybe didn't start in the crystal world?
So I think in the beginning, less is more. I am definitely a more is more kind of person in a lot of areas of my life. But when it comes to like practical technique, the simpler the better. And that can start with also curating a very small collection of stones. That's why the book is only 13 monographs long. Some of them have really more than one stone in them, but honorarily, it's, 13 categories of stone, we'll say, are in the book. And starting with what's in your backyard. The first rocks that are in this book are things that are really humble stones, like flint, like hagstones, like some of these fossils that were common in places we associate with our kind of ancestral magic and witchcraft and traditional lore. But you don't necessarily have to start with those. Here in Florida, I might start with a really interesting piece of limestone or, fossil I find on the seashore. If I'm really lucky, maybe some lustrous golden calcite. So pick something close to home, because I find that a lot of the argument, a lot of the pushback we find about crystals in the more kind of occulty space often has to deal with the relationship we have to the land we live on. Like, why are we outsourcing this magic to rocks from far away and exotic places, and incurring a dialogue about the ethics involved in that, which is a great conversation to have. But if those are roadblocks to you, start simply. If you find a green patch and you dig down, what rock are you going to encounter? Start with that. And then also start with things that maybe are just so ubiquitous they're easy to reach for. Things like any member of the quartz family, clear quartz, smoky amethyst, they're accessible. Start with things that are probably in your magical cabinet that you don't think of as stones, like salt, like lodestone or magnetite. And also, think about how rock informs your life in really subtle ways. The plasterboard in our walls, the concrete blocks used to build this room, the devices we talk on. I mean, talk about crystal energy. We couldn't do it without those mineral resources. And when we when we begin to contextualize our lives in terms of rocks, stone magic becomes a really natural thing to work with. In most cases, most of the magic we do with rocks is also not going to consume them. There are exceptions, of course. If you're making magical salt and dissolving it or doing something along those lines, you're going to run out of salt until you buy more. Some things like amber and jet were historically used to produce sacred smoke and incense. So there's some incense recipes in the book. That's obviously going to consume your supply of amber and jet. But, otherwise, if you get one piece of flint you love, if you get one piece of quartz you love, you've got it for life. It's not like an herb that you have to constantly refill the jar of, or candles that burn out and need to be replaced. They are this wellspring of magical support. And once we really learn to partner with them, we've got that going on forever.
I love that. And I love how in your book, the stones that you've selected are stones that human beings have relationship with, and how that relationship that we have with these stones develops over time as we work with them. It's such a beautiful connection to not only the stones, but our ancestors as well.
Playing with rocks is just about the most human thing you can do. In the course of writing this book, I stumbled across evidence of things so old I couldn't fathom it. A little before I really sat down to start working on the manuscript, I remember reading a survey of an archaeological discovery in the Kalahari Desert in South Africa that was about 22,000 years old, and it was a collection of perfectly rhombohedral calcite crystals brought into a stone shelter, like a shallow cave, and left there by some hominid tens of thousands of years ago. They don't occur in any place nearby, so they were brought there intentionally. The way they were arranged and discovered suggests they had some sort of ritual purpose. Like, stone magic is very, very old magic. Of course, we've had plant magic. We've had, magic making use of animal resources as well. We've had astral magic and solar magic, but these are things that are decidedly more ephemeral. I can't necessarily go out and find the remains of someone's botanical magic if it is only 2,000 years old. But we can find evidence of stone magic that is that old and older. And the stones that I chose in the book were ones that had significant stories in terms of the length of their relationship with us, but also in terms of the kind of magic that they weave with us. I wanted to make sure that we see crystal magic comes in a lot of different forms. We have beneficent virtues, protection, healing, love, beauty, prophecy. We have maybe some more, shall we say, some virtues that have some teeth and nail to them. So we've got lead in this book, and toadstone, which is a kind of pseudo mythical gem, but they were sometimes used for less savory workings, as the case might be. And then we've got everything else you can imagine, because no matter when and where, humans are humans. We have the same needs. We have the same hearts. We have the same hopes and wishes and dreams. And so it's no surprise that time and time again, if you look at emeralds throughout human history, people attribute similar virtues to emeralds. I think part of that is a projection of our own humanity, and part of that is also just the wisdom of the stone itself is sharing with us over and over again.
It's amazing.
Well, I think that we could talk to you for days.
Yes.
So you have an open invitation. Anytime you want to come up to New York, please, we would love to have you. And I hope that everybody follows you on social media and buys all of your books, which we sell here at the shop, and especially your new book, The Witching Stone. It's amazing.
Where can people learn more about you? What's your website and your social media?
Thank you so much. So if anyone wants to find me, theluminouspearl.com is like your all in one stop to find out more about my books, the classes I teach, some media appearances, other stuff will probably be there. You can follow me on most social media at The Luminous Pearl. And if people have questions, if they want to know more about the books or anything else, reach out. I'm usually pretty responsive, particularly on Instagram, of all places. That's where I spend the majority of my time. But if you track me down, I will do my best to get you an answer.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your passion with us today. We really appreciate it. And again, thank you so much for your time and for these amazing works and the stories about the stones. We appreciate it so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we will see you on the next episode. And, give us a holler, give Nicholas a holler with any questions, comments, feedback, share with your friends, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
That's all for tonight, witches, but the magic doesn't stop here.
Be sure to follow Apothecary After Dark wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Leave us a comment or review. We'd love to hear what's stirring in your cauldron.
And you can always find us at shopamityvilleapothecary.com or at Amityville Apothecary across all the socials.
Until next time, keep your wards up, your wands at the ready, and your spellwork sharp.